After college, I thought I'd landed my dream job in Denver at a digital marketing startup. 6 months in, I was falling apart, panic attacks in the restroom, calling in sick just to hide, nights where sleep never came. My apartment in Capitol Hill felt less like a home and more like a locked cell. My employer's health plan pointed me toward Riverside Wellness Institute, a glossy facility in Cherry Creek that looked more like a luxury spa than a psychiatric clinic. Everyone online raved about it, 5 stars everywhere, glowing reviews about breakthrough methods. That's where I met Dr. Adrian Keller, a psychiatrist with silver hair that looked almost too perfect, like a wig you couldn't prove was fake. His pale eyes stayed on you like searchlights, unblinking, clinical. After a single session, he diagnosed me with the acute maladaptive disorder and recommended their immersive therapeutic program. At first, it was harmless enough: group talks, yoga, guided breathing. Then the enhanced treatment began. They led me to a locked room in the basement painted grey so flat it hurt to stare at. They strapped sensors to my body and played strange audio through headphones, distorted whispers, pulses, and voices speaking backward. I could never make out what they were saying, but my tongue would twitch, trying to echo the sounds. Keller claimed the 4 drips were only vitamins, but afterward my vision blurred, and a bitter taste coated my mouth. Other patients started showing odd changes. One developed uncontrollable tics, another began speaking in a monotone like she was reading from a script. We were forbidden to compare notes, but everyone was changing. The breaking point came when a fellow patient slipped me a map to the records room. Sneaking in one night, I discovered my diagnosis had been rewritten 3 separate times without my consent, each more severe than the last, justifying increasingly invasive treatments. The last form had a box checked: Phase 3 neural conditioning, consent acquired through persuasion. Worse, I found corporate documents tied to a pharmaceutical company already under federal investigation. The files described using false diagnoses to push experimental drugs and psychological conditioning, testing how far patients could be made to accept realities that weren't their own. That was the night I realized we weren't patients, we were experiments. Story 2: The Return to Hollow Pines. Years later, after the tremors in my left hand worsened, I drove through upstate New York in the rain, heading back to a place I'd sworn never to see again: Hollow Pines Psychiatric Center, where I'd been locked up as a teenager after my brother's death. The institution had shut down for years, but recently reopened under new management. Supposedly they'd kept old files, and I needed answers. Inside, everything looked freshly renovated, but beneath the new paint lingered the stench of floor polish and antiseptic. A grey-haired psychiatrist, Dr. Simmons, handed me my file. Large sections were blacked out. The medications listed stopped me cold: drugs I'd never heard of: Neurofex 7, Synaptival, TX149. I didn't remember taking them, but the logs showed I'd been dosed daily for months. In the margins were handwritten notes: tremor onset at week 6, within acceptable limits. As I read, my left hand shook so violently the papers rattled. Simmons pretended not to notice. Then I saw a hidden page, a research memo between the hospital's former director and Genaxis Pharmaceuticals, praising the success rate of their adolescent trials. They called us the ideal subjects: pliable, disposable, and easily explained away. The most chilling discovery? A consent form claiming I'd been made a temporary ward of the state, giving doctors permission to sign off on experimental treatments without my parents. Dr. Simmons whispered that other former patients had returned with the same symptoms. Some were already dead. She told me to keep copies of what I'd found and hinted at a survivors group that met secretly nearby. I left shaking, with the knowledge that my entire adolescence had been carved up for research, and the people who did it had never faced justice. Story 3: The Woman Who Never Left. When I was 19, my best friend Lydia was admitted to Westbridge State Hospital for severe depression. I visited every weekend. She hated the place, the way the staff hovered, the way her room was always too cold. Then one week, she stopped writing letters. Stopped calling. When I asked staff, they said she'd been discharged to outpatient care. But I never saw her again. Years later, I worked a temp job digitizing medical records for the same hospital. One night, sorting through a dusty archive box, I found her name. The file said she died of respiratory failure at age 20, just a month after admission. But stapled to the back was a report marked Confidential Research Protocol. It described her as a patient compliant, suitable for extended observation. The final line made my stomach twist, a subject transferred to long-term subterranean unit, Project K. I asked one of the older staff if they remembered Lydia. He just muttered, Some of them never left this place. Don't go digging. I still dream of her calling from beneath the hospital floors. Story 4. The Man in the Mirror Room. A cousin of mine spent a year at St. Mark's mental health centre after a breakdown. When he came home, he refused to look at mirrors. One night, drunk, he told me why. During therapy sessions, staff took him to what he called the mirror room. 3 walls were reflective glass, the 4th a heavy steel door. They'd strap him down and flash images on the glass, family photos, childhood drawings, distorted faces that looked almost, but not quite, like his own. He swore the reflections sometimes moved independently, mouthing words he couldn't hear. When he begged to stop the sessions, the staff told him the mirrors weren't mirrors at all but screens linked to a cognitive feedback imaging. He said he didn't believe them, because once, his reflection smiled long after he'd stopped. Even years later, he covered every reflective surface in his apartment. 2 weeks after telling me this, he hung himself. In the note he left behind, one sentence stood out, They got in through the glass. Story 5. The Black Van. At a private treatment center outside Chicago, patients sometimes disappeared overnight. Staff always claimed they'd moved on or completed their program. One patient, a man named Marcus, didn't buy it. He started keeping notes, times, dates, descriptions of the black unmarked van that pulled up to the side entrance at 3 a.m. every few weeks. He said patients went in, but the van always left with fewer people than entered. Marcus smuggled his notebook to his sister during visiting hours. She came back the next week demanding answers. The staff swore Marcus had been discharged the day before. But his personal belongings were still in his room. His shoes by the bed. His toothbrush wet. The sister called the police. By the time they arrived, the hospital had burned to the ground in an electrical fire. Records destroyed. Staff untraceable. The only thing salvaged from the rubble was Marcus's notebook, singed but legible. His last entry was written the night before he vanished. If they come for me, don't believe what they tell you. The van doesn't take people away. It takes them deeper.